Hi class, it's Bill Berry back with another video from our Getting Started with JavaScript. We're in about week 2 of our course, and we want to look briefly today at some ways to make our code more readable. So let's jump down there to that slide. Why do we want to make our code readable? Why is this important? Well, there are several audiences that you have, several folks that you want to make sure can read your code easily and understand it as quickly as possible. Your first audience is me, frankly. If you turn in work, you want your instructor to be able to quickly find out what's going on and what you have done, and you want me to be able to consume it very quickly and see exactly what you've done. That's a good reason in itself. Second, if anybody else looks at it, if you show your code to some friend and say, look what I'm writing in JavaScript, you would like them to be able to most quickly see what's going on in your code, to not be confused by it. Third, you might not think about this one, but you are also an audience for this. You may think, well, it doesn't matter, I wrote the code, I'm going to remember it. Well, not so fast. If you come back to this code in 6 months or a year, a couple years from now, you might look at it and go, what the heck was I thinking? Where was I? What's going on here? So you actually won't remember nearly as much about your code as you may think you will. And so it is useful to make the code good for yourself as well. So let's look at some ways in which you can do that. First, good naming of variables goes a long way. In fact, we're going to name things throughout the quarter. Functions come later, but naming of variables for right now is important. We're going to look at some examples of that, but good variable names will give a lot of context to your program and will tell people right away what you meant by certain things. Second, comments. If you have any code sections that are doing things that might not be completely obvious, it's good to put a comment in to say, hey, this is what is the intention of this coming section of code. Comments are not interpreted by the language. They are ignored by the language, but they are there for the humans, so they are there to sort of help people out. Third, white space is also useful. If you have a whole bunch of lines of code with no blank lines between them, it gets very hard to read and it's very dense and hard on the eyes. But if you use white space purposefully to separate whatever you want to think of as sections, little bits of code that kind of hang together for some reason, that will help the eye and that'll make it more readable. And fourth, when we get to indentation, you'll see that indenting things can make life a lot easier too. And what we typically want to do there is to show things that are subordinate, things that are part of a subsection of things. We won't come back to that, so let me just give you a quick example. Let us jump out of here real quick and look at our starter code. And even here, you know, we indented several things here. We indented the body because it's part of the HTML block. We indented script because it's part of the body, and we indented this code because it's part of the script. So that's great, but let's look at the same code and let me outdent everything. Now, with a quick glance down, you can't see if everything's matched up. Is it well formed? Is everything got its closing tag? Well, yeah, this one's short enough you can probably see that, but that's not really what we want, right? Let me put it back this way. Now it's pretty easy to tell that everything is matched and what belongs with what. So you may not think it's a big deal, but indentation really is a bigger deal in longer programs. So let's just jump back to the slide. So let's look at specifics on naming and commenting just so you can understand it fully, and we'll also talk about the white space a little bit at the same time. So first, let's look at variable naming. The language doesn't really care what you name things. Internally, as it's going to work with it inside the machine, it doesn't really make any difference. But the humans are certainly going to care. The readers are going to care. So, for instance, if you were to look at these examples and you were to see this thing that said, I'm creating 3 variables, N, A, and B, and then later you go and use those, anybody who looks at that's going to go, what does N mean? What is A and B? Now, you might have thought they were mnemonic because the first letter stands for something, but that's really not going to help most readers. It's going to be hard for them to understand. But if you name them something a little bit longer, like name, age, and balance, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Then when I do subtractions of the current year versus the age, it's going to make perfect sense. Or when I ask the user for their name and store it in the variable, of course it's going to make sense. So just naming things right will make a very big difference. So spend a few more characters. Don't just go with one letter. That also means you're going to probably want to cut and paste, right? So instead of typing the names of all of these things, either use autocomplete when it offers them, or cut and paste them so you don't make any mistakes, and then it just won't be that big a deal. So variable naming is a biggie. Now let's look at commenting as well. There are reasons that we want to comment. I kind of mentioned those before, but if you're trying to clue in readers as to what is coming in the current, the section they're about to read, and you want to give a little more context to that code, you can make a comment. Again, the language is going to ignore it, so this is purely for the humans. There are two types of comments that you can use. There are line comments, and that uses a / symbol. And that symbol indicates that everything from here to the end of the line is going to be a comment. You can put those on a line by itself or put them on the line with code, and the language is going to ignore everything after the // By the way, if you study C, same thing. If you study Java, same thing. So // is very common in the world of modern programming language. Now here's an example. If you see this on a line, age equals age plus 1. Well, maybe the user understands that clearly enough. If so, don't comment, but if you think it's useful, you can put / user had a birthday, so I'm increasing their age by 1. Oh, okay, that kind of explains why you were adding 1 to the age. So that's a single line comment. JavaScript and C and Java also support block comments, and the way that you do those is you start with a /* and you end with a */. Now you might think somebody was crazy to invent these weird characters, but if you look at your number pad, you'll see that those two things are right together, and they'll kind of roll off your fingertips if you look over there and use those. Those make it make more sense. Anyway, everything between those symbols is a comment. So any code that you type, like in this case, I start with /* and I could have started putting the comment right after it. I don't have to put space there. But in this case, I started the block, I ended the block, and then inside, everything else here is going to be ignored as a comment. So that's how block comments work. And again, C and Java support same kind of commenting. So let's look now at an example. Let's look at a program. This program is completely technically correct. It will run fine, but read it over real quickly, pause it, and look and see if you can make any sense of what it's trying to do. I think you'll see that it is pretty hard unless you are very savvy about this formula. This is really kind of the thing that gives it away, but most humans are not going to read that and understand anything about what's going on. Why? Well, look at how awful the variable names are, A, B, and C. We could not have thought of worse things, right? They're not even mnemonic in any way. So that's pretty bad. Also, the lines are kind of smashed together. Everything's kind of run together, and it's kind of hard to see whether there are some sections where certain things are happening. So we don't really like this. This is bad. Right? Now, keep in mind, I'm going to reserve the right a few points on each assignment for style, and I would count off. You would lose a few points on your assignment if you turn in something like this. So let's look at the next version, see if it's any better. Well, this one, now we're using a letter or a couple of letters to describe our variables. So P, V, R, and N. Now, also from the prompts, you can kind of tell those would be kind of a giveaway anyway. But notice now the variable names say, oh, P, V, R, and N. Maybe you're getting the idea that this is a financial formula. And if you know financial formulas, then you recognize those variables. But not every user is going to understand them. So I'm not sure I would use them anyway. But at least it's getting better. And also notice we have some white space in between here. We have a blank line. So here we have all of our input stuff. And then here we have our calculation stuff. And actually this might be up here too with the calculations, and then at the bottom we write things out. So this blank line really should be here instead. Anyway, things are getting better. So let's look at one more version and see if we can make it a little bit better yet. Now we've spent a few more characters on naming. So we have loan amount, annual interest rate, years to pay. Super clear. They are unmistakably clear and very contextual, very descriptive. So we like those a lot better. Also, even though you may say it's silly, it's a free-form language. We can line things up like this. And by doing that, you can see the parallel nature of these things. And I think that looks a little more readable, right? And then all of our formulas are together. And so here's the inputs, here's all the calculations, everything makes more sense now. And then here's our outputs down at the bottom where we're showing the payment amount. So that documentation is certainly a lot better, right? Now it's readable, it's spaced nicely, like everything is kind of right. The question is, should we add some comments? Do we need to do anything to describe what's going on here? Well, the question should always be, does it add value? If I put a comment here, is it going to be anything that's not going to be obvious from the code? One thing I could do is come up here and put a line comment that says inputs, and then here calculations, and then here output. But does that really add any value? Is it not kind of obvious to your eye that up here we're grabbing a bunch of inputs from the user, that here's calculating a lot of stuff, and that here you're outputting things because it's document.write? I think that's kind of obvious. So you can write those things if you like, but just be aware, don't over document, don't over comment, because if the reader is going to understand it anyway, you're just adding clutter, and it can get, I can give you some more technical reasons, but for now, just don't comment on the obvious. That's the best thing to do. And so here's a little comment to just remind you about that. So in this video, we really just touched on this one topic, and that is what can you do to make your code more readable? And so hopefully that's a useful thing as we move forward. And we're going to do another video next talking about how to communicate with user through pop-ups, a little dialog box to pop up and communicate to the user, but that's going to be the next video. So thanks for watching this one, and we will see you back hopefully at the next one. Thanks for watching.